I'm thinking about a whole bunch of stuff as I walk to work this morning, and I keep coming back to this difficulty that we're having with one of our kids at home. And earlier in my life, I was one to comment on other people's parenting and be like, oh, such and such allow this and such do this, and but at some point somebody mentioned how they're frequently the recipient of that kind of criticism, that people like to say, oh, so and so does this, and I can't believe they do that, and they're gonna regret it, and what is it doing, and how deeply that hurt them, because the thing that they were so often criticized for was something that they had come to feel had built the deepest connection for them between them and their children. And I recognized myself in that, and I recognized my willingness to criticize others in that. And from that point, which is over a decade ago, I think, I have made an effort not to be one of those people who criticizes parents too easily for their parenting, because nobody's got this figured out. Nobody knows what the right answers are. Nobody gets the results that they think they are. And every family has its degrees and versions of dysfunction. Every family deals with, problems and has a hard time getting along, and holds grudges, and nobody's doing it any better than anybody else. There's no hierarchy of it. And it's come to my attention lately because some people have started to voice their criticisms, and because to me, and then because criticisms that others make have made their way to me, that our difficulties with this one child have been the subject of people saying, oh, well, this, and oh, well, that. And these people, first of all, have no idea what they're talking about. They don't know. They're not here. They're not participating. They don't have a stake in it. They're just looking from the outside. And for another thing, it doesn't really matter to these people at all, in any kind of real, significant way, how this shakes out. We have a child who has difficulty dealing with and expressing emotions. This kid wears their heart on their sleeve and can be the most loving, kind person, but also can be the cruelest, meanest person. And the smallest thing can set that off, and we've developed a way of dealing with this where we've essentially been picking our battles, and if this kid needs more time to develop, we're trying to allow them that time, allow them that space, and still show love and support and kindness. And that means that right now we have to do a lot of giving, and we have to be flexible, and we have to be extra supportive, and we have to be extra kind and extra forgiving and extra understanding. And maybe the compromise side of things is a little more on, like, the scales are tipped a little more where we're compromising more. And people can say this and people can say that, but they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't really care. They don't really care. And so, shut the hell up. I think my biggest motivation to tackle this with the approach that I have is that I have spent so much time and energy in my life doing the opposite, treating people in the opposite way, and it's done nothing but create more misery. And people would act the way that they were supposed to act, not because they cared or wanted to, but because if they didn't, I would require a heavy price from them for not behaving in the way that they were supposed to. And what did it do? It didn't really make them better people. It just made them willing to play a role because they didn't want to deal with the BS that I would put them through. And it didn't make me any better of a person. It just made me a kind of a pseudo-tyrant. And it didn't make me any happier. I was miserable. I was a miserable person. I was a miserable person to be around. Probably a lot of people still think I'm a miserable person to be around. But, what do they know? What do they care? How many of them sit down and actually talk to me and get what, but with this kid, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that anymore. And, am I preparing him for the world and this and that? And, if he needs more time and I could give him that time, what's wrong with that? What's so bad about that? Because the world is a cold and cruel and unforgiving place, I have to be cold and cruel and unforgiving. I have to mimic that. I have to be an insufferable prick to my children. I have to set limits on this relationship and say that I am willing to be in this relationship with you. I am willing to be your parent only so long as you abide by this and this and this and this and this. to me, that's too far for me. I won't do that, you know. Several years ago, I read this essay by Sabina Spielrein, and it really, it put into words something that I'd felt for a long time, but didn't know how to express, didn't know how to formulate. But really, reading it changed my life. And she talks about dream substitution and this phenomenon of dreaming yourself as another person, and how it has nothing to do with who the other person actually is, but only with how your subconscious can manipulate that person into expressing a symbol, expressing your desire or your wish. So you're just transforming this person into a means of your own expression of yourself, and it has nothing to do with who that person is or how they feel or what their life really is. And the way that she sums up this phenomenon is to say that only suitable people exist for us. And you know, I'm not gonna turn this kid into a suitable person. I have put a lot of effort into not treating other people as just suitable people. Not just turning them into a mirror to reflect some version of myself that I need to express. You know, I think it's ridiculous that people would even suggest to me that is what I should do here in this situation with this child who is struggling, who is trying to figure out how to express and understand himself and interact with the world around him, and is having a very difficult time at that and failing. And the idea is that I'm supposed to say to him, how dare you struggle to regulate and understand and express your emotions in my family? How dare you impose your individuality and idiosyncrasies on me, and to think that somehow I'm justified in this, that somehow that makes me the better person, the morally upright person. You know, this is fair. It's not fair that he does this to me. Well, life isn't fair, you know? So how about that? How about we flip the friggin' script on it and say that, yeah, isn't it just as ridiculous of me to demand fairness in a world that isn't fair? And if I'm going to make a mistake, if I'm going to mess this up, isn't it better that I mess it up in trying to be too kind and too understanding and too forgiving, rather than being too cruel and too merciless and too demanding? You know, I mean, I don't know. It's just the whole thing's hard enough without, you know, everybody else who really, at the end of the day, doesn't care at all. You know, only mimics it, only pretends to, because they're transforming us into suitable people for them to express something about their lives, when, you know, what about their lives is so much more, you know, well-functioning than ours. This kid's not bringing drugs into the house. This kid's not stealing, you know, from us. He's not, you know, what's he doing that's so terrible? He has a hard time regulating his emotions. He has a hard time learning how to regulate his emotions. you know. So, what's the big deal? Why do I have to demand a hard line? You know, you people have no idea. You want to come at me with friggin' hard lines. You have no idea the hard lines that I've demanded in my life. You have no idea. Not even the faintest conception of an idea of the consequences I've imposed on those hard lines. You don't know. Not one, you know, not a clue. Not a clue. The horror and terror and unforgiving, unmerciful, just hard line that I've imposed in my life. And for what? And that's the solution here. What, you know, what would I have learned from that experience of destroying lives if I turn around and just do the same thing here? You just completely out of your depth and have no understanding and no stake in this, which is what allows you to have no understanding, because it doesn't really matter to you, because you don't really care. So, you know what? If people really want to get into this, we could take notes. I'll make a list of all the things that I disapprove of in your parenting style, and all the things that have not worked in your family that I think you should have done different. You could do the same for me, and we'll compare notes and see where that gets us.